All right, let's dive right in. We're talking about Big History, this incredibly ambitious project to tell the entire story of everything, from the Big Bang all the way to us today. It's been a huge success. But here's the twist. What happens when a story that massive, that successful, starts tripping over its own feet? That's what we're digging into.
So, what is big history, really? Well, at its core, it's all about creating one single flowing narrative that connects all of knowledge. It doesn't look at physics, biology, and human history as these separate boxes. Nope. It sees them as chapters in one epic, science based story of the universe. And the backbone holding this whole story together is a concept they call thresholds. You can think of these as key turning points, moments when the conditions were just right for something totally new and way more complex to appear. As you can see, it all kicks off with the Big Bang. Then you get stars lighting up, then new elements, our planet, life itself, eventually leading to human learning, farming, and bam, the modern world. These 8 thresholds are the signposts of the story. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This whole framework has blown up. It's being taught all over the world in universities and schools. But, as the researcher Lionel Babbage asks, what happens when that very success starts to cause brand new problems? And that brings us to our first major point. The issues that big history is facing today, they aren't coming from failure. Ironically, they're a direct result of it becoming this established, institutionalized field of study. I mean, this slide just lays out the paradox perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you've got all the signs of success you could ask for: big associations, academic journals, worldwide curricula. But on the other side, that success comes with risks. Standardization, where the story gets a little too neat and tidy, it gets its own technical jargon that can shut people out. And what started as this wide-open question risks becoming a closed-off system just for the experts. The historian Sebastian Conrad really puts his finger on a key worry here. The real danger is that in trying to find these universal scientific patterns, big history might just steamroll all the messy, unpredictable, and human parts of the story. The very things that make history, well, history. So with critiques like that, you might think the whole thing is broken. But according to Babbage's article, that's not it at all. And that leads us to the big argument for how to fix this. The framework was never meant to be rigid. It was built to flex. The core idea here is that we don't need to scrap big history and start over. The original idea is actually solid. What it needs is to be revitalized, brought back to life, by focusing on 2 principles that were there from the beginning: flexibility and accessibility. So first up is flexibility. What does that mean? It means that the threshold idea was never supposed to be some strict sequence of events. It was designed to be a sturdy skeleton that could actually absorb new scientific breakthroughs, like what ancient DNA is telling us about human migration, without the whole thing falling apart. You gotta think of the thresholds less like fixed checkpoints in a race and more like giant landmarks that help you get your bearings on a map. Take agriculture, for instance. The agriculture threshold doesn't say farming happened one way. It totally makes room for the fact that it popped up all over the world at different times with different plants. The framework actually expects that kind of variation. It invites debate, and that's its secret weapon. And that brings us to the second pillar for getting this story back on track. A framework can be as flexible as you want, but if people can't connect with it, what's the point? And let's be super clear. Accessibility does not mean dumbing down the science. It's about making the story make sense, and, this is key, making it participatory. It's about creating doors for people to walk through so they can see themselves in this giant narrative and even argue with it. And there's this fantastic tool for doing just that. It's called Little Big Histories. And the idea is, instead of starting 13.8 billion years ago, you start with something small, something familiar. Take your mobile phone. Seriously. If you trace its history backwards, you connect directly to the modern revolution, right? Global tech, supply chains, which were only possible because of agricultural societies that created surpluses, which depended on the collective learning of our species, all the way back to the silicon and lithium in its battery that were literally forged in the hearts of dying stars. All of a sudden, the entire cosmic story is sitting right there in the palm of your hand. And this isn't just a theory, it's being used. There's a big History of Asia course that doesn't just sprinkle in a few examples from Asia. It reframes the whole story. It explores the unique origins of rice farming, or challenges the standard narrative by asking tough questions like, why didn't the Industrial Revolution start in China? This is flexibility and accessibility in action. Okay, but all this talk of being open and flexible, it brings up a really important question. what stops the whole thing from becoming a chaotic free-for-all where anything goes? And that's where discipline comes in. You can't have flexibility without it. Big history can and should welcome all sorts of perspectives, but at the end of the day, it has to stay grounded in scientific evidence and stick to its goal of connecting knowledge across every single scale, from the tiniest particles to the whole universe. And as the commentator Ken Baskin points out, this isn't just an academic game. I mean, look at the world's problems today. Our old, siloed ways of thinking just aren't cutting it anymore. We desperately need more integrated, flexible ways to understand the challenges we face.
But we have to be honest. This is still a very live debate. There are critics, like David Lepore, who argue the problems might run deeper. He suggests that the threshold framework itself maybe isn't as scientifically robust as it could be, and that a real revitalization might mean making some more fundamental changes to the structure.
So all of this, the debates, the structure, the risks, it all leads to the final and, I think, most important question. Why does having a coherent, flexible, and accessible story of everything even matter right now? The ultimate vision for Big History isn't to create some fixed, official encyclopedia of the universe. It's to build something more like an intellectual commons, a shared story that we all help shape and take care of, all while being guided by scientific rules and a sense of shared responsibility. And the value of a shared story like that is just huge. In a world struggling with planet-sized challenges like climate change and biodiversity loss, Big History doesn't have the easy answers, but it offers something more basic and maybe more powerful: orientation. It's like a giant map that helps us see where we are, how in the world we got here, and how everything is connected. And that sense of orientation fosters this amazing double vision. On one hand, it helps us become better global citizens, people who really get how our small, local actions can ripple out across the entire planet. And on the other, it makes us cosmic citizens who understand that our whole human drama is just one act in a much, much vaster and totally improbable play. Which really leaves us with one final, vital question to chew on. In a world that feels more fractured and divided every day, the challenge of creating a shared, science-based, and inclusive story about who we are and where we came from, well, that might just be one of the most important things we can do. So, what stories should we be telling?